"You've never been kissed," the giant cowgirl said, stepping closer. The plains stretched endlessly, gold and amber brushing the horizon as the sun leaned toward the earth, slow and reluctant, like a tired traveler settling for the night. Dust rose in faint spirals from the hooves of a lone horse, its rider a figure bent over the reins, muscles taut beneath linen and leather, hands calloused from years of toil. Harlan Roland moved with a quiet precision, each step deliberate, as though the land itself had taught him patience and restraint. He adjusted the brim of his hat, wiping a smear of sweat from the corner of his forehead, unaware of the sound of boots approaching, firm yet measured, crunching against the dry soil. Eveline came into view, taller than most, her presence undeniable even in the sparse haze of sunset. There was a softness in her eyes that seemed almost at odds with her height and strength, and yet it fit her entirely, the calm of a river alongside the force of a waterfall. She carried herself with a confidence that was natural, not performed, and her long braid caught the light, glinting copper against brown leather and weathered cloth. She watched him for a heartbeat, noting the tension in his jaw, the quiet hum of solitude that clung to him like a second skin. When she stepped closer, it was almost ceremonial, the way one approaches a campfire to warm hands, not to burn them. Her voice carried over the wind, low, teasing, but with an edge of genuine curiosity. "You've never been kissed." The words floated between them, neither daring nor demanding, more like a pebble skipping on still water, leaving ripples in its wake. Harlan blinked, a slow, deliberate motion, as if the world had tilted for just an instant. The question hung, light and impossibly intimate. He had been raised among wide skies and empty fields, taught that restraint was strength, that vulnerability was folly. Yet here was Eveline, tall and unflinching, asking something simple that cut deeper than any storm or solitude. He shook his head slightly, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips, unsure whether to deflect or answer honestly. Her gaze softened, just enough to hint at understanding rather than judgment. She crouched slightly to inspect a splintered plank by the fence, her hands moving over rough wood with surprising delicacy. "You work hard," she said, her voice barely rising above the wind. Strong hands, steady arms, but sometimes strength forgets itself in the quiet. There was no mockery, only observation, a truth wrapped in warmth, and for a moment, Harlan felt seen in a way he hadn't known was possible. The horse shifted beneath him, impatience coaxing movement, but he stayed, compelled by a strange mix of curiosity and caution. Eveline did not hurry, did not demand attention, but the land seemed to lean toward her presence, the dust settling differently where she walked. He noted her stance, firm yet inviting, the subtle shift of her shoulders when she studied the horizon, and in that study, a patience mirrored his own. They worked together without ceremony, side by side rather than in tandem, completing small tasks that demanded attention but not speech. Eveline lifted a bucket of water with easy strength, handing it to him with a nod, and Harlan felt the weight of the gesture far beyond the liquid it carried. Each action, each glance, spoke in a language neither had to name aloud. There was a rhythm to their movements, a quiet acknowledgement that trust could be built in shared labor, in the silent recognition of effort. The wind carried more than dust that evening. It carried the faint scent of sage and the tang of the approaching night. Eveline paused by a fence post, her gaze distant, as if following an invisible thread woven between the hills and sky. Harlan watched her, curiosity tempered by restraint, the questions he would have asked trapped behind a careful veil. She was a puzzle he did not yet wish to solve, only to observe, to understand in the slow unfolding of hours and small gestures. He thought of the stories his father had told him, of men and women meeting in sudden sparks, of kisses and promises and losses. None of them had prepared him for Eveline, for the way her quiet confidence seemed to brush against the walls he had built so carefully. She noticed a flicker of thought in his eyes and smiled, the corners of her mouth lifting in a way that suggested mischief, tempered by understanding. The air between them was charged, not with loud declarations, but with a subtle weight of possibilities. A stray colt wandered close, sniffing at the fence. Eveline knelt to steady it, her hands gentle, her eyes soft as she whispered words that Harlan could not hear, but felt in the warmth radiating from her. He approached slowly, wary yet drawn, and she allowed him to stand beside her without a word, sharing a silent acknowledgement that some moments were too small for conversation. The colt, reassured, turned back to the open plains, and they both let a quiet laugh escape, soft as the evening light. Night fell gradually, painting the sky with bruised purples and muted golds. Harlan lit the small lantern by the cabin door, its flames steady in the soft wind. Eveline lingered by the threshold, watching the glow stretch across the wooden boards, and for a long moment neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Presence alone conveyed more than any speech could. He noted the way her silhouette caught the fading light, strong yet serene, and a thought formed quietly in the stillness. Perhaps strength and gentleness were not opposites, but companions. She turned toward him, stepping closer, not demanding, only existing in the space he had not known he had been missing. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we could finish the fence." There was no urgency, only an invitation, and in it, the promise of connection, slow and deliberate. Harlan nodded, his throat tight with a feeling he could not name, a mixture of anticipation and the first fragile glimmer of trust. As she walked away, her boots soft against the dirt, the plains seemed quieter, not empty, but expectant. Harlan lingered by the lantern, watching the horizon absorb the last colors of the day, carrying with him the warmth of her presence. He did not yet know what tomorrow would bring, only that he wanted to see it arrive with her at his side. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the faint echo of her question, and for the first time in a long time, he considered the possibility that life could offer more than survival. It could offer companionship, understanding, and something that felt dangerously like hope. The night settled fully, and the lantern's light danced against the cabin walls, a tiny beacon in the vast expanse. Harlan stood alone for now, but not lonely, his thoughts tracing the shape of a tall, quiet woman who had stepped into his world with a question that had opened a door he had not realized existed. And beyond that door, beyond the reach of even the longest shadows, something waited, something that promised warmth, challenge, and the slow bloom of something neither had expected. He walked inside, letting the soft creak of the floorboards under his boots be the only sound. There he paused, feeling the weight of the day settle in his chest, a mixture of fatigue and exhilaration. He thought of Eveline's hands on the water bucket, her steady gaze, her quiet laughter, and the way the wind had carried her voice to him. It was in those small, almost invisible moments that he realized a truth he hadn't yet named. Some people arrive and change the shape of your world without warning, without grand gestures, simply by existing and noticing. Outside, the plains slept beneath a blanket of stars, indifferent yet somehow attentive to the unfolding story. Harlan moved to the window, watching the soft flicker of her shadow fade into darkness. There was no rush, no urgency, only the knowledge that tomorrow and the days after held the possibility of connection he had long denied himself. And in that knowledge, he felt a warmth he could not have predicted, a quiet thrill of anticipation that made the vast emptiness of the West feel suddenly smaller, gentler, and infinitely more alive. The night held its breath, carrying with it the promise of what was yet to come, and Harlan let himself imagine, just for a moment, the path that might stretch ahead. Hands brushing, laughter shared, the slow, steady building of trust and tenderness in a world that had too often been harsh and unforgiving. He allowed himself the luxury of hope, fragile and trembling, but real. And so the first night passed, with the wind whispering across the plains, carrying the echo of a question that had opened something inside him, and with it, the promise of a story waiting to be written in quiet gestures, stolen glances, and the unspoken acknowledgement that two hearts might find their rhythm side by side. Morning light spilled across the plains, soft and golden, brushing the wooden boards of the cabin with warmth. Harlan stepped outside, the air crisp, carrying the faint scent of sage and sun-baked earth. Eveline was already near the fence, moving with ease and quiet purpose, her long braid catching the sun like copper in motion. The way she worked, unhurried yet precise, made every action feel like a declaration. She belonged to herself, to the land, and perhaps quietly, to the possibility of something more. He approached slowly, boots crunching against the gravel, and she looked up, eyes meeting his, a faint smile teasing the corners of her mouth. There was a tension there, delicate and alive, that made his chest tighten. He had been alone for years, shaped by the rhythms of the land and the silence of open skies. But Eveline moved through the world as if she carried a different music, one he was only just beginning to hear. "You missed a spot here," she said lightly, tilting her head toward a fence post. The words were casual, almost teasing, yet her eyes lingered on him, searching for something beyond work. He followed her gaze, noting the quiet intensity in the way she regarded him, and felt a pull he had not expected, a longing wrapped in patience and invitation. He knelt to adjust the plank she indicated, their hands brushing briefly. It was a touch so small, so fleeting, and yet it carried the weight of unspoken recognition. Harlan's fingers lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary, and Eveline's eyes caught his, holding, soft and questioning, as if asking if he would allow himself to step beyond restraint. He did not pull away, not immediately, and the brief contact felt like the first note of a melody that had been waiting to play. A sudden movement startled a nearby horse, and Eveline's reflexes were swift, her hands steadying the animal before it could bolt. Harlan watched, heart quickening, not at the danger, but at the ease and confidence she exhibited. She had faced more storms than he had, he realized, and yet here she was unafraid, and in her courage, he saw a reflection of the strength he had long tried to cultivate alone. They worked in silence for a while, and in that quiet, Harlan noticed details he had not before. The curve of her jaw softened by sunlight, the slight tilt of her shoulders when she concentrated, the way her laughter, rare and unguarded, flowed like a hidden stream through the stillness. It was in these small observations that his admiration grew, not as a blaze of instant attraction, but as a slow, steady heat that warmed without consuming. At midday, the work paused, and Eveline pulled a cloth from her pocket, wiping dust and sweat from her brow. Harlan offered her a sip from his canteen, and their hands met again, lingering. This time, neither of them flinched. He felt a stirring, something fragile and urgent, and she met his gaze with a patience that invited confession. The wind carried the scent of sun-warmed earth, and in that moment, the world contracted to the two of them, their shared breathing and silent understanding more intimate than any words. "You don't speak much," Eveline remarked softly, tilting her head. "I suppose you're not used to people noticing." There was no accusation in her voice, only gentle observation, and Harlan felt the weight of truth in her words. He nodded, considering the quiet life he had always led, and wondered if he could allow someone in, if he could trust enough to let the walls crumble just a little. Eveline's smile deepened, a subtle challenge resting in her eyes. She stepped closer, not abrupt, but deliberate, her shadow falling across his. "Sometimes," she said, her voice low, "the right company makes the world lighter." There was no expectation in the words, only the promise of possibility, and Harlan felt a tremor in his chest, the first acknowledgement of something he had long denied himself. Hope. The afternoon sun shifted, shadows lengthening across the plains, and Harlan found himself walking beside her, their movements synced in quiet harmony. They spoke little, for words were unnecessary. Presence alone conveyed what neither had dared name aloud. A small bird landed near the fence, chirping insistently, and Eveline laughed, soft and genuine, the sound lingering in the air like a warm current. He laughed too, feeling the tension inside him loosen, and in that shared moment, he sensed the fragile beginnings of trust taking root. Evening approached, painting the sky with bruised purples and soft amber. Eveline paused, leaning against a post, her gaze distant, and Harlan stopped beside her. He did not speak, only let the silence stretch comfortably between them. Her fingers brushed against his, tentative, and he responded, closing the gap so that their hands were fully entwined. The touch was deliberate, yet gentle, grounding them both, carrying the weight of unspoken understanding. "You could stay a while," she murmured, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. "See the stars with me tonight." Her words were casual, yet they held an invitation, one that made his heart beat in unaccustomed rhythms. He nodded, and together they walked toward the cabin, the plains stretching wide and golden behind them, carrying the quiet thrill of possibility. That night, the fire flickered low, casting amber shadows across the walls. Harlan and Eveline sat side by side, the warmth of the flames mirrored in the closeness of their shoulders. They spoke in murmurs, sharing fragments of stories, small confessions of the past, and glimpses of the selves they rarely revealed. Harlan's hand brushed hers again, deliberate this time, and Eveline did not pull away. The connection was slow, careful, deliberate, an intimacy built on recognition and shared space, rather than fleeting impulse. The first kiss came like a whisper, unhurried, a gentle meeting of lips that carried years of hesitation, curiosity, and unspoken longing. It was not sudden or passionate in a way that startled. It was deliberate, tender, the kind of kiss that settled into the soul and lingered there. The world seemed to pause, the wind stilled, the firelight held. And in that moment, neither Harlan nor Eveline could recall ever feeling more certain of anything. Pulling back slightly, they rested foreheads together, breathing synchronized, hearts racing in tandem. The plains beyond the cabin seemed quieter somehow, as if the land itself had acknowledged the culmination of a subtle, patient courtship. Eveline's eyes shone in the firelight, warmth and mischief dancing together, and Harlan felt a weight lift from his chest, replaced by something fragile, precious, and exhilarating. Morning arrived again, soft and golden, and the world seemed changed. Harlan rose first, carrying the memory of the night with him, and found Eveline already outside, tending to the land with the same effortless grace. Their eyes met, and the unspoken acknowledgement of yesterday's tenderness passed between them like a current. Each movement was now infused with intimacy. Each gesture weighted with shared understanding. The small colt returned, sniffing at the fence, and together they guided it back, their hands brushing repeatedly, fingers entwining naturally. Words were few, but the language of presence spoke volumes. Trust, admiration, hope, and the quiet knowledge that life had shifted subtly, irrevocably. Evening fell, and the wind carried their laughter across the plains. Harlan glanced at Eveline, towering and gentle, and realized that he had found not just companionship, but a mirror of strength and courage, a partner in both work and silence. The land, vast and unending, had conspired to bring them together, and in that recognition, he felt a deep, abiding peace. The stars emerged slowly, one by one, and they stood together in the fading light, shoulders touching, hands entwined, hearts beating in tandem. The first kiss had been a promise, but the quiet moments that followed carried weight beyond passion, understanding, patience, and the steady bloom of love that required no haste. Harlan felt it fully, the depth of possibility, and Eveline sensed it too, the calm certainty that comes from finding someone who sees not just the surface, but the soul. And so, under the watchful sky of the endless plains, the story reached its gentle, thrilling climax, not in grand gestures, but in quiet, deliberate recognition. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the echo of a question that had started it all, and now answered in a way that neither had expected. The promise of companionship, understanding, and the slow, patient bloom of love that would carry them both into the days yet to come.